Captain Elias Ward had never thought that one day he would stand among the greatest rulers of the galaxy. When the invitation reached Earth, it did not come with fanfare or a long announcement. It appeared in the secure communication chambers of the United Terran Council, glowing with the crest of the Xyranthian Empire, a civilization older than human history itself. The message was simple. A human representative was invited to attend the royal wedding of Princess Serenia of Vaethra. The council debated for weeks. Some thought it was a trap. Others believed it was an opportunity too great to ignore. In the end, they chose Elias Ward, not because he was the most powerful, but because he had earned respect as a man who listened more than he spoke. He had served as a soldier before he became a diplomat, and that balance of courage and patience made him the right choice. When the shuttle lifted from Earth, carrying him beyond the stars, Elias could not help but wonder what strange path had been set before him. The journey to Vaethra lasted weeks in folded space. When his ship emerged near the royal system, Elias saw the palace world for the first time. It was unlike anything built by human hands. Vaethra shimmered like a jewel in the dark, its surface wrapped with towers of crystal that caught the light of 3 suns. Vast rings circled the world, not of stone but of living metal that pulsed with energy. Alien vessels drifted in perfect patterns, their designs elegant and ancient. Even after years among the stars, Elias felt small before such a sight. He landed at the spaceport reserved for foreign dignitaries. There were many others who had been invited, towering reptilian envoys from the Tavar Dominion, graceful feathered nobles of the Aliari, and even mechanical envoys of the Keelan construct. Elias was the only human present, and that fact alone drew curious looks. Some seemed amused, others suspicious, but none offered him more than polite nods. He could feel their judgment. To them, humanity was young, untested, perhaps too fragile to sit among the ancient empires. Escorted by tall guardians in silver armor, Elias was led into the heart of the palace. The halls stretched endlessly, their walls alive with shifting light. Every surface glowed faintly as if the palace itself breathed. Elias walked with steady steps, refusing to show awe, though inside he felt like a child stepping into a dream. At last, he entered the grand atrium, where the guests had gathered. Music unlike anything he knew drifted in the air, voices that echoed in layers as though sung across many dimensions. The nobles of countless species stood in their radiant garments, their every movement graceful and deliberate. Elias, in his simple dark suit bearing Earth's insignia, felt almost plain among them. Yet he kept his shoulders square, his gaze calm. He was not here to impress with beauty. He was here to represent humanity. The wedding was to last for days, each cycle filled with ceremonies that symbolized the unity of the empire. Elias watched as processions of warriors marched in dazzling armor, their steps perfectly synchronized. He observed alien artisans weave patterns of energy in the air, forming luminous sculptures that floated and sang. Every ritual carried centuries of tradition, every movement meant to remind all present of the empire's glory. For the most part, Elias stayed quiet. He spoke only when approached, answering politely but without arrogance. To many he was invisible, another foreign envoy with no voice in the great matters of the galaxy. He was content with that, yet fate had its own plans. It happened on the second day of ceremonies. Elias stood at the edge of the hall, watching as the princess herself entered. Serenia was unlike any figure he had ever seen. Her form was tall and elegant, her skin faintly luminous like starlight reflected on water. Her garments shimmered with colors that shifted when she moved, and her eyes, deep silver, held a quiet strength. She did not look fragile despite her beauty. She moved like someone born to rule. The hall fell silent as she passed. Nobles bowed deeply, their heads nearly touching the floor. Elias, unfamiliar with the exact customs, simply offered a respectful nod. If anyone noticed his lack of formality, they did not speak. The princess walked past, her gaze sweeping over the hall, and for the briefest moment, her eyes lingered on him. Elias did not flinch. He met her gaze calmly before she turned away. Later that same evening, a small accident occurred during a ritual. A servant carrying an ornate staff, a piece of ceremonial importance, stumbled. The staff clattered to the floor, echoing through the chamber. The servant froze in terror, for no noble would lower themselves to touch an object meant for royalty. The hall grew tense. Before Elias even thought about it, he stepped forward, picked up the staff and handed it back to the trembling servant with a steady smile. The reaction was instant. Whispers filled the hall, sharp and disapproving. Some aliens looked shocked, others offended. Humans, they thought, were reckless, too casual with sacred things. Elias simply said he dropped it. I only helped. His voice was calm, not defensive. The servant bowed deeply in gratitude, his eyes wide. Unseen by most, Princess Serenia watched the moment closely. She did not join the whispers of disapproval. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as if she had just discovered something rare. For the rest of the ceremony, her gaze returned to Elias again and again, though he seemed unaware. When the day's rituals ended, Elias returned to his quarters. He stood by the great window, staring out at the glowing rings of Vaethra. He thought of Earth, of the simple blue sky he had left behind, and wondered what place humans would find in this galaxy of giants. He had not come here seeking attention or influence. He only wanted to prove that his people could stand among others with dignity. Still, he felt that something had shifted. Somewhere in the palace, the princess also sat in silence, her mind troubled. She was meant to marry by tradition, her life bound by choices made long before her birth. Yet in the human's simple act of kindness, she saw something her people had long forgotten. A willingness to act not for power, not for honor, but for another's need. It was small, but it struck her more deeply than all the grand displays of wealth and ceremony. And so, without either of them realizing it fully, a thread had been woven. A moment of human humility, a glance from alien royalty, and the stage was quietly set for events that would shake the empire. The galaxy did not yet know it, but the wedding of Serenia would not be remembered for uniting noble houses. It would be remembered for something far more unexpected, the day a princess looked past tradition and saw a human. The palace of Vaethra did not sleep. Even when the suns dipped behind the crystal towers and the skies turned a deep shade of violet, the halls glowed with soft light, and music drifted through the air. Elias Ward woke early on the third day of the royal celebrations, knowing another cycle of ceremonies was about to begin. He had attended the grand processions, the speeches of nobles, and the endless displays of power, yet he felt like an outsider moving through a dream. Still, he carried himself with the calm of a soldier who had learned patience long ago. The hall that morning was prepared for what the locals called the ceremony of 1,000 lights. Elias had heard whispers about it since his arrival, each description more unbelievable than the last. Some said it was a symphony made of stars, others that the sky itself would bend. When he entered the great hall, he realized none of the rumors had captured its scale. The chamber stretched higher than any cathedral on earth, its ceiling open to the heavens. Thousands of orbs floated in the air, each glowing with a unique light, some sharp like flames, others soft like mist. They shifted slowly, forming patterns that seemed alive. The guests gathered again, nobles in shimmering garments, envoys from distant empires, and guards who stood like statues. Elias stood quietly near the back, keeping his posture respectful. He had learned that here silence was often wiser than words. Yet he could not stop his eyes from wandering across the beauty of the hall. Every detail carried meaning, every step of the nobles precise. To them, tradition was not just a guide, but a law older than memory. When the music began, Elias felt the air vibrate. Voices rose, not from instruments but from beings themselves, layered in harmonies so complex that they seemed to fold reality. Light and sound moved together, the orbs flashing in time with the voices. He had heard human choirs, orchestras, and even the thunder of war. But nothing like this. This was not performance alone. It was power, a reminder to every soul present that the empire was eternal. At the center of the hall, Princess Serenia entered. She wore robes of silver and pale blue, woven with threads that shimmered like starlight. A crown rested lightly upon her head, glowing faintly as though it was alive. All eyes followed her as she moved with grace, every step matched with the rhythm of the light and music. Elias watched in silence. He had seen her the day before, but this moment was different. She did not look like a figure bound by duty. She looked like the heart of the empire itself. Beside her walked the noble who was meant to be her husband, Lord Kalen. Tall, broad, and wrapped in armor etched with gold, Kalen carried himself like a warrior who expected victory in all things. His eyes were sharp, his expression proud, and he glanced at Elias only once, just enough to remind the human of his place. Elias ignored the look. He had no part in this marriage, no role in the vast plans of alien dynasties. He was a guest, nothing more. As the ritual continued, nobles presented gifts, each one a symbol of alliance. Strange machines that bent gravity, living creatures shaped by centuries of breeding, crystals that contained knowledge beyond human science. Elias had no gifts to present. Earth was still young compared to these ancient powers, and his presence was itself the offering. That fact sat heavily on him, yet he held his composure. Then came the moment that silenced the hall. Princess Serenia and Lord Kalen stood before the Emperor. Her father, a figure tall and radiant, his skin glowing with the faint energy of his people's power. He raised his hand and the lights dimmed. In a voice deep and commanding, he asked his daughter to confirm her choice of husband. It was tradition, though the outcome was already assumed. All expected her to speak Kalen's name. The noble himself straightened, already preparing to accept the cheers of the hall. Elias, standing in the shadows at the back, barely paid attention. He knew what would be said. But then he saw her eyes. Serenia's gaze swept across the chamber, pausing on each noble, each envoy, as though searching for something more. Her eyes moved past Kalen and stopped, on Elias. For a moment he thought she looked by mistake, that her gaze would drift away. But it did not. Her silver eyes held his with a quiet intensity that froze him in place. The silence of the hall deepened as her lips parted. "I choose him," she said. The words echoed like a blade through glass. Every orb of light in the chamber seemed to flicker at once. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the hall erupted. Voices rose in shock, shouts of outrage, cries of disbelief. Kalen spun toward her, his face pale with fury. Nobles argued loudly, some demanding the human be removed at once. Others cried that the ceremony had been broken, that the empire itself was insulted. Elias stood frozen, his mind struggling to make sense of what he had heard. Surely she had misspoken. Surely she meant someone else. But her gaze never left him. In that silence between shouts, her expression told him she had spoken with purpose. The Emperor rose slowly from his throne. His expression was carved from stone, yet his eyes burned with restrained power. When he spoke, the hall trembled. "What have you said, daughter?" Serenia did not bow. She stood tall, her voice calm, though all the galaxy seemed against her. "I choose the human. I choose Elias, Ward of Earth." The uproar grew wilder. Kalen stepped forward, his armor ringing with each movement. "This is madness. He is nothing. A stranger. A child among stars." His voice carried rage, but beneath it Elias heard something else. Fear. Elias wanted to speak, to deny it, to step away and end this madness. But the princess's eyes held him. There was no fear in them, only certainty. Somehow he knew that if he spoke against her, he would crush something fragile yet powerful. Something that mattered not only to her, but to humanity's place in the stars. So he said nothing. He stood with steady silence as the hall drowned in chaos. The Emperor raised his hand and the voices fell quiet. His gaze moved from Serenia to Elias, and for the first time Elias felt the weight of 1,000 years of rule pressing down on him. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the Emperor's voice cut through. "If this is your choice, then you defy the council, the nobles, and the order of this empire. Know what it means, Serenia?" "I know," she said simply, and with those words the balance of the galaxy shifted. Elias returned to his quarters later, his thoughts a storm. He had not sought this, had not even spoken to the princess, yet somehow his presence, his actions had drawn her choice. He did not understand it, and yet he could not deny it. Somewhere deep inside he felt the truth. The empire was no longer unshaken, and humanity was no longer invisible. In another chamber, Serenia sat alone, her mind calm despite the storm she had caused. She thought of the human who had bent down to help a servant, who had shown kindness in a hall where pride ruled. She had made her choice not from rebellion but from hope. For the first time she felt she had chosen freely. And so as the palace trembled with the voices of angry nobles, two lives, human and alien, were bound together. Neither fully knew what it meant, but the galaxy would soon find out. The palace was no longer quiet. News of Princess Serenia's choice had spread faster than any human message system could deliver. By the morning of the third cycle since the announcement, the halls were buzzing with whispers, arguments, and shocked gasps. Nobles who had never tolerated a human's presence, now glared openly at Elias Ward. Some muttered curses in languages he could not understand. Others simply stared, unsure whether to treat him as a guest or an intruder. Elias felt their attention like a weight pressing against his chest, yet he kept moving through the corridors with calm steps, refusing to give fear the power to guide him. He had grown used to being underestimated. On Earth, humans were young among the stars, often dismissed by older civilizations. The same pattern repeated here, among the Xeranthians, one of the oldest empires in the galaxy. Yet for the first time, a human stood at the center of an ancient ritual chosen by royal decree. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. Elias could not yet understand how a simple act of kindness, a small gesture to help a servant, had caused the princess to see him as someone worthy. The hallways were crowded as he made his way to the council chambers. The emperor had summoned him to speak formally, to assess whether he was worthy to be considered in the eyes of the empire. Elias wondered what they expected. He was a soldier, a diplomat, not a warrior of legend or a master of galactic politics. But he had learned that courage often came from standing firm when others doubted you, not from titles or wealth. When he entered the chamber, the council of elders was already seated. Each figure radiated authority, their eyes sharp and calculating. Some had skin that shimmered like liquid metal. Others feathered crests atop their heads, still others bore elaborate crystal growths. Every one of them looked at him with suspicion, and a few with outright hostility. They expected him to fail, to tremble and falter, to prove that humans were not fit for the privileges of interstellar nobility. Elias squared his shoulders and met their gazes without hesitation. The emperor spoke first. His voice carried the weight of centuries, calm but powerful. You are a human. You are an untested species. You have been placed here by fate, not by law. Tell me, Elias Ward, why should my daughter's choice be honored? Elias took a deep breath. He thought of Earth, of the wars humans had endured, the challenges they had faced without the technology or knowledge of older species. He thought of his crew, the ordinary men and women who had achieved extraordinary feats. And he thought of Serenia, standing with quiet certainty in a hall that roared with disapproval. Because humans are not afraid to act, Elias said slowly, because we survive. Not because we are the strongest, but because we adapt. We are not perfect and we do not pretend to be, but we face what others avoid. And if the princess sees something in me that her people have lost, perhaps it is because humans still remember what it is to be honest, to be true to ourselves and to others. The council murmured among themselves. Some shook their heads. Others leaned forward, curious. One elder, a towering figure with crystalline ridges along its arms, spoke in a voice that sounded like breaking glass. You speak boldly for one so small among the stars. Words alone cannot justify the choice of a royal. Actions must follow. Are you prepared to face what our laws demand? Elias nodded. I am prepared. The trial was set to begin at dawn. It would test his strength, intelligence, and resolve. Everything the Xeranthians considered necessary for one who would join their royal family. The tasks were designed with alien physiology in mind, with dangers that could easily defeat someone human. Yet Elias did not flinch. He had survived impossible situations before, and he had learned that often, cleverness and courage outweighed brute strength or exotic abilities. The first task was simple in theory, but daunting in execution. He was to cross a chamber filled with shifting platforms suspended over a void. To the Xeranthians, this was trivial. They could hover or leap with unnatural grace. Elias, human and bound by gravity, had to rely on balance, timing, and observation. He watched carefully as the platforms moved, noting patterns invisible to those who acted without thought. One misstep could send him falling into the abyss, but he focused, breathing steadily. Step by step he advanced, using human ingenuity to bridge gaps where strength alone would fail. By the time he reached the other side, murmurs filled the chamber. Some elders looked impressed. Others simply refused to acknowledge it. But Elias had passed the first test. The second challenge involved knowledge. He was seated before a complex alien mechanism that contained centuries of recorded law, history, and strategy. He was to solve a series of puzzles, questions that required insight and adaptability. Many Xeranthians could access the mechanism's logic intuitively. Humans had no such advantage. Yet Elias approached each puzzle carefully, using logic, patience, and reasoning. Where brute intuition failed, analysis succeeded. Hours passed, yet he did not falter. When the final lock clicked open, the chamber echoed with stunned silence. For the first time, a human had demonstrated mastery over something designed to challenge the oldest minds of the Empire. The final task tested character. Elias was placed in a simulation of a disaster, a city under siege, civilians in danger, and choices to be made that would affect countless lives. He had to act decisively, balancing risk and reward, knowing that mistakes could be fatal. The simulation was immersive, designed to push him to panic, to reveal flaws and weaknesses, but Elias remained calm. He made choices based on compassion, logic, and courage, saving as many as possible while taking risks that others would have avoided. He emerged from the simulation exhausted, but resolute. By the time he returned to the council chambers, the elders were quiet. Some nodded in acknowledgement. Others still glared, unwilling to admit a human had exceeded expectations. The Emperor, however, remained silent, his gaze unreadable. Elias could not tell whether he had passed or failed. All he knew was that he had done everything he could, relying on human strengths in a world that often measured value differently. When Serenia entered the chamber, her eyes shone with quiet pride. She had watched the entire trial, unseen by the council, yet fully aware of every detail. To her, Elias had proven what she had already known. Courage, honesty, and adaptability mattered more than heritage, power, or tradition. He had faced challenges no human should have been able to face, and he had succeeded, not because he was stronger or faster, but because he was human. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice measured. "You have faced our trials. You have shown courage, wisdom, and compassion. You have acted with honesty and honor. While many of my people may struggle to accept it, it is clear that you have proven your worth." A murmur spread through the chamber. Some nobles shifted uncomfortably, but even they could not ignore the evidence. Elias felt a strange mixture of relief and disbelief. He had not sought power, had not asked for recognition, yet he had earned respect among beings who had ruled the stars for millennia. Serenia stepped forward, her hand reaching out to him. "Elias Ward, you have shown the qualities my people have long forgotten. I asked you to stand with me, and you have done more than anyone could expect. You are worthy not just of my choice, but of the respect of this empire." Elias took her hand, feeling the warmth of her confidence and the weight of her trust. He did not fully understand what lay ahead, but he knew that together they had begun something extraordinary. Humans had often been underestimated, dismissed, and ignored. Yet here, in the heart of the Xyranthian Empire, one human had stood tall and proven that courage, wisdom, and integrity could match the power of the oldest civilizations. The council reluctantly acknowledged the verdict. Some bowed, others muttered in discontent, but none could deny the truth. The human had passed, and the princess's choice had been validated. As they left the chamber, the halls were no longer filled with whispers of scandal, but with cautious curiosity. Nobles glanced at Elias with new eyes, seeing not just a human, but someone who had faced impossible challenges and emerged victorious. Citizens who had watched from afar began to murmur their approval. The ripple of change had begun, and the Empire would not soon forget it. Elias and Serenia walked side by side, silent but united. Neither spoke of the trials, of the whispers, or the outrage. Words were unnecessary. They both knew that what had begun here would shape not just their lives, but the future of humans among the stars. Outside, the light of Vaethra's suns painted the crystal towers in gold and silver. The palace, once a symbol of unyielding tradition, now seemed alive with possibility. For the first time, a human and an alien princess had challenged expectations and won. And in that moment, Elias understood something profound. Being human did not mean being weak. It meant having the courage to act when others feared, the wisdom to think when others rushed, and the heart to care when others ignored. That more than anything made him worthy. And as the suns rose higher, casting brilliance across the palace, Elias realized that this was only the beginning. The Empire had seen what humans could do, but the galaxy had yet to witness the full measure of their strength. The halls of the palace were tense, but the tension was no longer focused solely on Elias. Now it included the princess, and through her, the fate of an entire empire teetered on a fragile line. The nobles whispered behind closed doors, plotting, questioning, and arguing over what had just happened. The Council of Elders debated openly in public chambers, some advocating for mercy, others insisting that tradition must be enforced no matter the cost. A human had dared to claim a place among them, and that alone was enough to send ripples through the galaxy. Elias walked beside Serenia through the crystal corridors, their hands brushing occasionally. She moved with her usual calm grace, but Elias could sense the weight she carried. Her choice had not been simple. The consequences were immense. Entire houses could rise in rebellion. Alliances forged over centuries could collapse. And yet she had made her decision freely, guided not by politics or fear, but by instinct and trust. Elias felt a growing admiration for her courage. Few rulers, human or alien, would have risked so much for something as fragile as a personal choice. The council summoned Elias again, not for a trial this time, but for negotiations that would decide his future. Ambassadors from distant worlds had arrived, some curious, some hostile. All eyes were on him. Some expected him to bow, apologize, or flee. Elias, however, had learned long ago that humility did not mean weakness, and courage did not require arrogance. He walked into the chamber steadily, acknowledging the glances of each noble, his expression calm, measured, and unwavering. The eldest counselor, a being whose crystalline skin reflected the light in sharp angles, spoke first. "Human, your presence has upset the balance of our empire. The princess has chosen you, and yet you do not belong here. Your actions, though clever, were not sufficient to make you equal among us. What do you say for yourself?" Elias took a deep breath. "I am not here to overthrow your customs or disrespect your traditions. I am here because the princess has seen something in me, something that humans have carried for millennia. We survive not because we are the oldest or the strongest, but because we adapt, because we learn, and because we face the unknown with courage. If that is not enough for you, then let the future judge us both. But I will not apologize for being human, nor for doing what is right." A murmur ran through the chamber. Some elders looked impressed, though unwilling to admit it aloud. Others frowned, unconvinced that a human could ever be worthy of the hand of Xyranthian royalty. Kalen, the noble who had been passed over, clenched his fists, the anger in his eyes raw and almost tangible. He had expected to marry the princess without challenge, and now his life's ambitions were crumbling before him. The emperor, watching silently, finally rose. His presence was immense, a living reminder of the power and history behind the throne. "Enough," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "It is clear that the human possesses qualities that many of you have long forgotten. Yet the empire cannot simply bend to personal preference. Order must be maintained, but so too must wisdom and justice. Therefore, we shall test whether this choice can be made without tearing the empire apart." The test was announced immediately, a series of public trials designed to measure not only Elias's ability to adapt, but also his understanding of the empire, his diplomacy, and his moral compass. Unlike previous challenges, these trials would be observed by the citizens, the nobility, and the council together. It was both a demonstration and a risk. Failure could lead to humiliation or worse. Success could shift perceptions of humanity across the galaxy. Elias prepared carefully. He studied the customs, listened to advisors, and learned about alien protocols that seemed unnecessarily complex. He had no illusions. He was still human, a species young and untested, walking in a world built for beings far older and far stronger. But Elias had learned that humans had a unique advantage, the ability to think in ways others did not anticipate. Innovation often came from necessity, and necessity was a constant companion for humanity. The first trial involved diplomacy. Elias was tasked with negotiating a trade agreement between two alien houses, whose history was filled with mistrust and open conflict. Humans were often seen as weak, but Elias approached the task with patience and clarity. He listened carefully to both sides, asking questions that highlighted common interests rather than differences. His words were simple, honest, and unexpected. Slowly, the tension eased. By the end of the session, not only had he brokered an agreement, but he had also earned respect for showing fairness and insight. Even Kalen could not hide a grudging acknowledgement of his skill. The second trial tested leadership. Elias was placed in charge of a simulated crisis, a colony on the outskirts of the empire under threat from a mysterious alien predator. Unlike the simulation he faced before, this one was designed for Xyranthian physiology. He could not leap or glide like his alien counterparts. Every choice had to be carefully measured. He coordinated the defense, assigned tasks, and made decisions that balanced risk with safety. Some moves surprised the observers. Others drew criticism, but overall the colony survived intact and morale remained high. It was proof that humans could lead in ways the Empire had not yet appreciated. The final trial was the most personal. Elias was asked to make a choice that affected lives beyond immediate observation. He was given scenarios where he could save the few at the expense of the many, or risk himself to protect strangers. It was designed to reveal selfishness, cowardice, or indecision, qualities the Xeranthians assumed humans possessed in abundance. But Elias acted decisively, combining compassion with strategy. He prioritized the greater good without abandoning those who relied on him, demonstrating a balance of heart and intellect that few could match. Throughout these trials, Princess Serenia watched closely, her faith in him never wavering. Her eyes, always steady, conveyed reassurance, encouragement, and pride. Elias, despite exhaustion and the enormity of the task, drew strength from her presence. He realized that trust and courage were contagious, that someone's belief in you could empower even the most ordinary human to achieve extraordinary feats. By the time the trials ended, a quiet had fallen over the Empire. Citizens who had witnessed the events were whispering among themselves. Nobles, once certain of human inferiority, now regarded Elias with curiosity and even admiration. The Council of Elders, though reluctant, had to acknowledge what was plain to see. The human had not only survived, he had excelled. Kalen, the noble who had lost the princess, withdrew with a storm of fury in his eyes. He would not forget this day, nor would he forgive the challenge to his pride. Yet even he could not deny that Elias had proven himself in ways unexpected and undeniable. The human had shown strength, wisdom, and courage beyond measure, qualities that transcended species. The Emperor finally spoke, his tone measured but resolute. "Elias Ward, you have faced trials that would have defeated many of my own kind. You have shown courage, insight, and integrity. Your presence here is no longer a question of chance, but of merit. Let it be known that you are acknowledged as worthy in the eyes of this empire." A hush fell across the hall, followed by scattered applause. Some nobles bowed, others remained silent, but none could deny the decree. For the first time, a human had been recognized as an equal among the Xeranthian elite. The princess approached Elias, her expression calm but radiant with pride. "You have done more than anyone could have expected," she said softly. "You have shown that humans are not to be dismissed. You have earned your place here not by force but by courage, intelligence, and heart." Elias felt the weight of her words and the significance of the moment. He had come to this galaxy as a guest, expecting to observe, to learn, and perhaps to represent his species in small ways. He had not anticipated being chosen by a princess, nor facing trials that tested every aspect of his character. Yet he had endured, succeeded, and in doing so, opened a door for humanity that no one could close. As they left the chamber together, the halls of the palace felt different. There was respect in the glances of the nobles, curiosity among the citizens, and a quiet tension in the air. The empire had been shaken, yes, but it had also begun to see the potential of humans in a new light. Elias, once an outsider, now walked as a symbol of possibility, proving that courage and integrity could transcend even the oldest and most rigid traditions. Outside the palace, the suns of Vaethra rose over the crystal towers, casting light that shimmered in 1,000 colors. Elias and Serenia stood together on a balcony overlooking the city, their hands brushing as they watched the empire awaken to a new understanding. The future was uncertain, full of challenges and opposition, but for the first time, humans and aliens alike could see that change was possible, and that greatness could come from the most unexpected places. And as the light of day spread across the kingdom, Elias realized something profound. Being human was not a limitation. It was a strength. His courage, compassion, and ingenuity had earned him a place among the stars, and alongside the princess, he would help reshape not just an empire, but the future of humanity itself. The morning sun cast long rays over the crystal towers of Vaethra, painting the city in gold and silver. The palace, usually a symbol of strict order and tradition, now seemed alive with anticipation. News of Elias Ward's trials and Princess Serenia's choice had spread like wildfire through the empire. Citizens whispered in marketplaces. Nobles exchanged cautious glances, and even distant worlds had sent messages asking about the human who had dared to challenge ancient customs. Elias, standing beside Serenia on a balcony, felt the weight of it all pressing upon him. He had succeeded in trials, earned respect and proven his worth, yet he knew the day ahead would be the true test. The wedding ceremony, redefined by Serenia's choice, was to be broadcast across the empire. Unlike a traditional royal wedding, it would include representatives from every corner of the galaxy, a testament to the bridge between humanity and Xyranthian civilization. Elias adjusted his attire, a simple suit enhanced with subtle adornments from Vaethra's finest artisans. Nothing ostentatious, he knew the real measure of a human was not in appearances but in actions. As the halls filled, Elias observed the faces around him. Some were skeptical, others openly hostile, and a few seemed genuinely curious. Even Kalen, the noble who had lost the princess's hand, stood among the attendees, his expression carefully composed but betraying tension. Elias could feel the eyes of the Empire upon him, but he drew strength from Serenia's presence. She moved with calm grace beside him, a living embodiment of the Empire's ideals, yet guided by her own heart. The ceremony began with rituals unlike anything Elias had seen before. Light, sound, and motion blended together to form a spectacle that was both awe-inspiring and deeply symbolic. Crystalline orbs floated above, reflecting colors that shifted with every step of the participants. Choirs sang in harmonies layered across dimensions, and the floor seemed to pulse in rhythm with the music. For a moment, Elias felt as if the universe itself had gathered to witness this event. When Serenia entered the hall, all attention focused on her. Her robes shimmered with starlight and her crown glowed faintly, a living symbol of authority. She paused, turning her gaze toward Elias. His presence was no longer that of a mere human observer. He stood among the Empire's most powerful figures, unshaken and dignified. His calm confidence, born of experience and quiet courage, spoke louder than any speech could. The Emperor, seated upon his throne of light and crystal, raised a hand. Silence fell. "Today," he said, his voice resonating through the hall, "we witness a choice that will reshape our empire. The princess has made her decision and all present must recognize it. This union is not simply a matter of tradition. It is a matter of understanding, courage, and the bonds that tie our worlds together." A collective breath passed through the room. Nobles shifted uneasily, their expectations challenged, their assumptions about human weakness overturned. Elias felt the weight of the moment but did not falter. He had faced trials, navigated political tension, and shown the Empire what humanity could achieve. Now, standing beside the princess, he understood that the true challenge was not in proving worth, but in guiding a future that others would follow. Serenia stepped forward, her hand extending toward Elias. "Elias Ward," she said, her voice clear and unwavering, "you have shown courage, wisdom, and integrity. You have faced the impossible and emerged with honor. Today we join not only our lives but our people's, so that together we may build a future stronger than tradition alone can achieve." The hall erupted in murmurs, some of surprise, others of admiration. The ceremony continued, but its tone had shifted. No longer was it merely a display of power and hierarchy. It had become a statement, a declaration that bravery, honor, and humanity itself had a place among the stars. Elias followed Serenia through the ritual, performing each step with care, aware of every eye upon him. Yet he remained calm, drawing on the lessons he had learned during trials, on the strength of human resilience, and on the trust placed in him by the princess. As the final act approached, the Emperor spoke again. "Let this union be a symbol of what can be achieved when courage and integrity guide our choices. Let it remind us that even the youngest species can teach the oldest civilizations the value of heart and honor." With those words, the ceremony concluded. Serenia and Elias stood together, hands joined, and the crowd rose in acknowledgement. Some nobles bowed, some applauded quietly, and citizens across the empire celebrated. Even Kalen, though his pride remained, could not deny the significance of the moment. Elias had done what no human had before. He had earned the recognition of a civilization older than memory. Outside the palace, the city of Vaethra shimmered under the light of 3 suns. The citizens who had gathered to witness the ceremony cheered, their voices echoing across the crystal towers. Aliens of countless species observed, some skeptical, others inspired. For the first time, humans were seen not as newcomers to be tested or ignored, but as equals capable of shaping the destiny of empires. In the quiet that followed, Sirenia spoke softly to Elias. "You have done more than survive, more than prove yourself. You have shown that humans have a place here, not because of power or heritage, but because of who you are." Elias looked at her, understanding the depth of her words. "I never imagined this," he admitted. "I only hoped to represent humanity well. I did not expect to stand here like this." "You have," she replied with a smile, "and the Empire will remember it. Not just today, but for generations." The days that followed were filled with preparations for the larger integration of human representatives into the Empire. Councils invited Elias to speak, to advise, and to act as a bridge between species. The trials and the wedding had shown the galaxy what humans could offer, and there was curiosity, respect, and even admiration. He was no longer an outsider. He was a symbol, a reminder that courage, honesty, and adaptability could overcome even the oldest prejudices. Elias found himself reflecting on what had brought him here. A simple act of kindness, a willingness to act without thought of reward, had set events into motion that would change the course of human history. He realized that the essence of humanity, its resilience, creativity, and empathy, was a power that even the most ancient civilizations had underestimated. Sirenia and Elias spent quiet moments together in the palace gardens, overlooking the shimmering city. "Do you think they will ever fully accept humans?" he asked, watching the light dance across the crystal leaves. "They may never fully understand," she replied. "But they will respect you. That is enough to start. One day, perhaps, they will see that your kind brings balance to the stars." He nodded, feeling a rare sense of peace. Humanity had been underestimated, dismissed, and doubted countless times, yet here they stood, recognized, respected, and finally part of the galactic story. And it had all begun with a single act of courage, amplified by trust and integrity. As the sun set over Vaethra, casting the city in shades of purple and gold, Elias knew the journey was only beginning. Challenges would come and obstacles would arise, but he was no longer alone. With the princess beside him and the respect of the Empire behind him, he had the strength to face whatever lay ahead. The galaxy had seen what humans could do, and the story of their potential had only just begun. For Elias Ward, the human who had attended an alien royal wedding as a guest, the extraordinary had become reality. He had been chosen not by chance, but because he represented something timeless: courage, honor, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. And together with Princess Sirenia, he would help shape a future where humanity was no longer a newcomer, but a vital force among the stars.